Hey everyone, Ren here. Welcome to all the new subscribers. Really appreciate your support. Seeing the growth of this channel lately really keeps me motivated and wanting me to create more horror stories for you all. If you're new and haven't subscribed, listen to the story. If you like what you hear, hit that subscribe button for me. And now, let's get to tonight's story. The Creature in the Spokane Woods. Written and read by Ren Bryant. Jim was always fascinated by the woods around his home in Spokane. Ever since he was a young boy, he would spend hours wandering through the trees, admiring the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves and listening to the sound of the wind rustling through the branches. But lately, his love for the woods has taken a darker turn. A year ago, just after his 16th birthday, he had seen something in the woods, something that defied explanation, and it had consumed his thoughts ever since. Jim was walking his normal route when he stopped to take a leak on a tree. As he was peeing, he saw a creature off in the distance, down at the banks of the Spokane River. Jim almost dribbled piss on his shoes when he saw it. The creature was tall and thin and blended in amongst the tree branches. Its skin was black as coal and its eyes glowed with an eerie red light. Its long and spindly arms ended in sharp razor claws that dripped with the viscous dark liquid. Its legs were bent backwards like those of a bird, and its feet were twisted and clawed. Its mouth was filled with rows of pointed teeth that glistened in the dim light. When it screamed, it let out a deep, rumbly growl that made Jim's testicles shrivel. As it walked, the creature's body seemed to contort and twist in unnatural ways, like a snake writhing in a pit. Its movements were both graceful and menacing at the same time. All Jim could think of was that he was prey, and it was playing with him before it would strike. Despite its demonic appearance, there was an intelligence in its eyes, a malevolent intelligence that suggested there was far more to it than a mindless monster. Jim felt the urge to run, to flee as fast as he could, but he couldn't bring himself to move. He just stood there with his dick in his hand. Finally, the creature turned and disappeared into the woods. Jim was left alone, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew he had to find out more about this thing, this creature that had appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Jim ran to where the creature was at and found the carcass of a deer, its body missing 2 legs and claw and teeth marks pockmarking its flesh. That was enough to get Jim to back off. Since that time, Jim became obsessed with the creature. He spent all his free time wandering the woods, searching for any sign of it. He skipped school, ignored his responsibilities at home, and became increasingly distant from his family and friends. One night, Jim had a vivid nightmare. In it, he was walking in the woods when the creature suddenly appeared in front of him. It spoke to him, its voice at first a death metal growl, then morphing into something comforting and warm like his mother. Jim woke up in a cold sweat, his heart going frantic. He tried to shake off the nightmare, but he couldn't stop thinking about the creature. It had taken root in his mind, its presence looming over everything he did. Jim felt like it wanted something from him, that it was reaching out to him, making himself known. Jim knew he had to find a way to confront the creature, to face it head on and find out what it wanted from him, either that or destroy it. But he knew that doing so would be dangerous, maybe even deadly. But if he could get a gun or something, maybe then he would stand a chance. Jim stopped at local stores and bugged the patrons there if they had seen a creature that was thin and tall and had red eyes. He pestered people as he walked past them on the sidewalks. In the shadows, He asked bad-looking types for a gun, something small that he could conceal in his jacket pocket, so he could take it out and blammo the creature in the stomach when the time came. Everyone he spoke to had the same reaction. He was crazy. Jim tried explaining the creature to his mom and dad, but his dad said he was making shit up and looking for attention. He raised the back of his hand and told them to get out of the room, stupid. Jim's mother, on the other hand, was worried about her son's erratic behavior. She took him to a therapist. The therapist tried to help Jim work through his issues, but he wouldn't listen. He was convinced the creature was real and that it was out there, waiting for him. "You didn't see it," Jim said. "You didn't see those claws, those eyes, the danger that its existence represented." What Jim didn't say was that he was feeling a bit alienated and discontent with life. He figured the shrink would probably come to her own conclusions about this and put it in a report for his parents. One day, Jim cut out of school early and went back home to fuck around. He sometimes did this when he scored dope, but today he was drug-free and bored. In his dad's study, he came across an old book. It was a collection of myths and legends from the area, and as he flipped through the pages, he came across stuff like Bigfoot and sea creatures in the Pacific Ocean. There was also a story about a creature that sounded just like the one he had seen in the woods. The creature was said to be a skinny demon with red eyes that haunted the woods of the Pacific Northwest. It was a relative of the Wendigo found in the Midwest. Natives said the creature could mimic human voices and could lure people deep into the woods. It was also supposedly capable of possessing humans and driving them to madness. Jim's heart raced as he read the story. It said that when the creature found a human that invaded its environment, it would go after the person, stealing their soul and eating their flesh. Jim was convinced that the creature he saw in the woods was the one in the book, and that it was trying to possess him, to take over his mind and control his every move. He read on, trying to figure out a way he could stop from being driven to madness. In the book, there was a ritual said to have been performed by the 5 native tribes who originally lived in the area that cleared the creature from the land. Though it would be extremely risky, Jim didn't think he had any other choice. He was scared, yes, but if he did nothing, he knew he would be a victim of the creature. So Jim decided to perform the ritual. He gathered the necessary materials, sticks, animal fat. Jim grabbed a jar of solidified grease his mom kept under the kitchen, and an old knife, and he went out into the woods to perform the ritual. He drew a circle in the dirt and began to chant the words from the book. At first, nothing happened. Jim thought maybe he had done something wrong, but then he heard a rustling in the bushes. The creature appeared in front of him, its red eyes pulsing in rhythm with Jim's frantic heartbeat. Jim continued to chant, hoping the ritual would banish the demon once and for all. But something went wrong. The creature began to change, its skin bubbling and twisting. It grew larger and more menacing, and its eyes began dripping something that looked like blood. Jim realized too late he had made a terrible mistake. The ritual had only made things worse. The creature was now more powerful than ever, and it was all his fault. "What have I done?" Jim cried out, his voice echoing through the woods. The creature advanced on him, its massive claws shimmering in a pocket of sunlight that snuck through the tree canopy. Jim tried to run, but the creature was too fast. It grabbed him by the shoulder, its grip like a vice. "You cannot banish me," the creature hissed, its voice echoing in Jim's mind. "You are mine now." Jim was trapped. The creature had taken hold of his mind, and he was powerless to resist. Its voice was inside of his head, a cacophony of hellish whispers that rang throughout his consciousness. "You thought you could banish me," the creature sneered, "but you have only made me stronger." Jim tried to shake the thoughts loose, to regain control of his own mind, but it was of no use. The creature was too strong, too persuasive. It seemed to know his deepest fears and desires, using them against him to gain dominance. Jim closed his eyes and focused on his breathing, trying to block out the creature's insidious voice, but the struggle was lost. The creature controlled every thought, every action. It sent Jim out of the woods, back home, back to his daily life. The creature had plans for Jim. It wanted to use him to wreak havoc on the world. It whispered dark thoughts in his ear, urging him to do terrible things. Jim's family and friends noticed something was off about him. He was distant, moody, and prone to violent outbursts. They tried to help him, but he pushed them away. One night, Jim was laying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when the creature appeared to him. Its eyes glowed in the darkness, and Jim felt cold. "You are mine," the creature hissed. "You will do as I say." Jim shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. "No," he whispered. "I won't let you control me." The battle inside his mind was driving Jim to madness. The creature was relentless. Day and night it continued to invade Jim's mind, twisting his thoughts and desires. Jim knew he was losing the battle. The next day, Jim went to school, but he wasn't himself. He was jittery and anxious, with deep, heavy bags under his eyes and a zoned-out look on his face. His classmates kept a safe distance from him. As he walked down the hall, he could feel the creature inside of him, urging him to do something terrible. As the day wore on, Jim felt himself slipping further into darkness. Somewhere in the back of his mind, the good part of Jim existed and struggled to be heard over the demon. That part of Jim told him he had to do something before it was too late. But what could he do? He was trapped, powerless to resist the creature's influence. Jim sat alone in the school cafeteria, his head in his hands. He felt a hand on his shoulder and looked up to see his best friend, Max. Though Jim wasn't always the nicest to be around, Max had always been there for him, even when no one else would. "Jim, what's going on?" Max asked, concern etched on his face. Jim hesitated, not wanting to put Max in danger, but he knew he had to tell someone. "I've seen something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something terrible, and it's taken hold of me." Max looked at him, thinking Jim had gotten into hard drugs like meth, and his eyes filled with understanding. "We'll figure this out," he said, taking Jim's hand. "Together." "Thanks," Jim said. "I know drugs seem cool, but..." Jim cut Max off. "It's not drugs," he said, his body jerking as he tried to get out the words. "There's something in me, something wanting to control me. A demon, some creature." Jim felt himself being consumed by madness and knew he couldn't do this alone. He needed Max's help and the help of anyone who would listen. After school, Jim showed him the book and the banishing ritual, and together they started researching the creature, trying to find a way to banish it for good. They discovered that the creature was ancient, with a long history of possessing vulnerable souls and devouring flesh. Some said it was originally a man who got lost in the woods and prayed to be saved when the devil appeared and changed him. Others said it was the evil representation of the forest itself, the dark side of nature. They also found stories of people who had successfully banished the creature, but the process was dangerous and difficult. Jim was scared, but he knew he had to try the banishing ritual again. He couldn't let the creature win. In the woods, Max laid down the necessary ingredients. Jim tried to help him, but his body was rejecting itself, trying to do the opposite of what he wanted it to do. Jim focused his energy on the good inside of him, and he started reciting the banishing ritual. As the words came together, he could feel the creature's power weakening within him. But just as they thought they were succeeding, the creature jumped out from nowhere and let out a death metal growl. Max and Jim stood frozen in fear as the creature slowly moved towards them, flashing its razor-sharp teeth. With a swipe of his spindly hand, it sent Max flying into the forest and advanced on Jim. Jim willed the goodness from within him, the small part that he didn't want to lose. He stood his ground. The creature lunged at him with lightning speed, but Jim was ready. He threw the grease at him, splattering it on the creature's face. It let out a howl that echoed throughout the woods. As it shook its head, the creature's voice changed to that of a scared woman. It begged for forgiveness. It said, "Don't harm him." But Jack didn't back down. He kept reciting the incantation. Each word of the banishing ritual made the creature cringe and retreat. Max joined Jim and put his arm around his friend's shoulder. Together, they shouted the banishing words, sending the creature back more and more, deeper and deeper into the woods. "Be gone! Depart, foul spirit! I command you to leave this place!" The creature let out a final wail and disappeared into the woods. Jim fell to his knees exhausted. As he catched his breath, he looked around. The trees and the foliage seemed brighter, more vibrant. And there was Max, looking at him, smiling and nodding. Max helped him to his feet, and they hugged each other tightly. "You did it!" Max said, his eyes shining with pride. Jim smiled weakly. "We did it," he corrected. "Together." Jim learned that true bravery was not about facing down monsters, but about facing up to one's own fears and insecurities. He began to find a sense of peace and acceptance in the woods, and learned to appreciate the beauty and mystery without succumbing to the dark and terrifying side. The whole experience changed Jim. He was no longer the trouble boy he had been before. Gone was the loner. Now he was stronger, more confident, and more determined than ever before. He had faced his fears and come out on top. But even so, Jim never spoke to anyone about what happened, deciding that it was better to be quiet about the experience than make people think he had a screw loose. He didn't even talk to Max about what they had done after they walked out of the woods. Though things were seemingly good, there was one thing that had always bugged Jim. He saved himself that day with the help of Max, but Jim didn't think the creature was really gone. Sometimes he would feel a gust of cold as he walked past the woods, and he couldn't shake the feeling that it still might be out there, lurking, waiting to strike again. It had lived for centuries, so it would be foolish to think he had banished it for good. But for now, he was safe, not scared. His parents listened to him, he had more friends, and that was enough.